number 5, Western Conference semifinals tonight on the Fan. Wolves in San Antonio, Davie, to take on the Spurs. All of our coverage will begin at 6:30 as soon as this show is done. Well, frankly, our coverage is continuing right now. Double T, kind enough to join us at the very last minute, Trent Tucker, via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Welcome back to the program. I must tell you that we played some sound earlier from Draymond Green. You may have heard some of it. Draymond basically is saying if the Wolves are going to exhibit any measure of pride, somebody is going to have to return the favor on Wemby and elbow him right in the throat as well. I'm here to ask you, as a former pro, whether that's the best way to win the battle or to maybe to win the war tonight. Double T, what do you think?
No, I mean, you don't want to put yourself in that situation. You just want to go out and win. You played this team now. You've had 4 games against them, and it's 2-2. And hopefully as you go into Game 5, the coaching staff have figured something out on how to beat this team.
So what is the formula tonight? You've watched these games. You know this is a big one. Game number 5 usually is often the Game 5 winner wins the damn thing. When you watch the Wolves in this series, what do you believe? Because obviously Wemby's going to be back. The Spurs are at home. That they destroyed the Wolves in Game 2. What's the formula? What's the approach the Wolves need to take tonight to give themselves a chance for the upset?
Well, for one, anytime you go into a Game 5, you want to get off to a good start, especially when you're on the road. And I've always said that for the home team, it's more pressure on them because it's almost like their first Game 7. They know that if they lose this game, they're facing elimination. And they're going to feel the pressure. If the Wolves can come out and get off to a good start, it's almost a free game for them. The worst thing that's going to happen for the Wolves is they're going to play Game 6 back on their home floor. And the best thing that can happen for them, they can have a chance to come home and close out game number 6. For one, you have to take care of the basketball. Don't turn the ball over. And force San Antonio to make shots without fouling them. It's going to be a raucous crowd. Don't get caught up in the emotion. And just have, a game plan that you can employ when Wemby is on the floor and when he's off the floor. I would like to see them use Naj Reid a little bit more when he's on the floor. When they run the pick and roll with Anthony Edwards, he's a pick and pop guy. And that's going to pull Wemby away, maybe if he's at the center position away from the basket, and that could create some driving lanes and give guys who are good off the dribble a chance to get to the basket and do some damage there. And then when Wemby's off the floor, see if you can move your offense down a little bit further. Don't start at 28 feet. Maybe start at 20 feet. So now guys like Julius Randle and Jay McDaniel and Naj Reid are in a better position to play off 1 or 2 bounces.
Let's talk more also about officiating, because the assumption is that there's often in a series like this an overcorrection. You have the Spurs coach after the game basically saying they've been pounding on him, and sooner or later he was going to get frustrated by it. They've been very physical with him. So often we see occasions when refs, even though they're not supposed to pay attention to this stuff, then in a game played there, end up being a little bit more protective of said player. You've seen these adjustments. You've seen these swings happen within games. So what's the defensive approach the Wolves take against Wemby? Because it has been physical. Do they just have to keep sort of testing the refs and saying, we're going to crowd him, we are going to get physical with him? If we back away from that, we're surrendering too easily. How big will the officiating be tonight in terms of how tight it is, how loose it might be?
Well, officiating is always crucial, but you have to come out and play your game, and then you make your adjustments from there based on how the officials are calling the game. And the Wolves can't back off. They know they have to be aggressive. They have to take his space away. They have to make it hard for him, to find space to create shots. And this is a big boys league now, so you can make those adjustments as the game goes along based on how the officials are calling the game right from the start. Let
me give you some numbers on Julius Randle in this series thus far. He is averaging, he's shooting 37% from the floor, he's only making 5 shots a game at this point. He has turned the ball over in 4 games 18 times, Double T. He's only got in those 4 games 7 assists. That's not a very good ratio, even though sometimes they do ask him to kind of be a point forward. Can they win? Can the Wolves, in all seriousness, have much of a chance to win this series if Anthony Edwards doesn't get better production from at least one guy? I would start with Julius. I guess you can include a couple other people. What have you seen in Julius, and how do they unlock him?
I think they have to use him differently in terms of how they locate him on the floor. And San Antonio brings those small defenders. And then when he's at, 25 to 26 feet when he catches the ball, it's going to be tough for him to maneuver around a smaller and quick defender. So they force him into bad spots where he has to over-dribble. And then that weak side defender all of a sudden comes from the blind side, and that leads to him turning the ball over. And when he does that, then he's not going to get back on defense, and that's going to create runouts for San Antonio, either to get to the basket for easy layups or find that transition three-point shot. So I would like to see Chris Finch readjust where they locate him when he starts his offense, put him down a little bit closer below the free throw line. And now he has the ability to play off 1 or 2 bounces. And when he has to build the ball more than twice, it's a disaster waiting to happen against those smaller defenders.
No, that's a great point. Do you want to see more or less of Mike Conley the rest of this series? Where does he fit in your mind?
I would like to see more Mike Conley. I know you ask in a lot of the Sumo and T.J. Shannon to play the point guard position. Right. And they're doing a heck of a job because these guys are out of position. You're asking them to run the team at this time of the year, the Western Conference semifinals against the San Antonio Spurs. So you have to give credit for them to doing the best that they can do. But I think in certain spots, you're going to need that steady hand and that veteran leadership of Mike Conley Jr. So I would like to see him on the floor in critical moments.
Anthony Edwards, I want to talk to you some more. We've talked about him obviously a lot over the years, but I am in the group that's very impressed with what he has been able to do. First, to get back out as quickly as he has. It feels kind of old school to me, Double T. It feels like the kind of approach and the kind of player who could play even among the old-timers from your generation, and that he would be respected for the fact that he's just willed himself and willed his body to not only get back out there, but let's face it, as the games have gone on, series has gone on, to play more minutes and to be extremely effective. They don't win, obviously, Game 4 without his fourth quarter. What do you see on Anthony?
Well, I think he has grown mentally. When your best player has been in these situations enough, they understand how to pick their spots and when to go off offensively. But also they trust their teammates in critical moments. When he was so exhausted at the end of Game 4, knowing that Wemby was not in the game, he relied on his teammates to carry him the rest of the way. And he drew the double teams, didn't take a bad shot, didn't force the situation that could lead to a turnover. He made sure his team kept that possession, and that's what Julius Randle and Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert was able to get a basket here or there to make a difference. And he has grown so much, and that's a nice thing to see because the great players, as they move on throughout years in the NBA, they learn how to master their game from a mental standpoint as well.
To me, the other big change in his game is it used to be kind of one or the other, the three or, driving to the basket. But even the driving, I think he's gotten smarter, working the angles better, and I think he's developed much more of a mid-range, which, as you know, even though it's a three-point game, it still counts. If you hit a high percentage of two-pointers in the mid-range, that's okay too. I think there's more variety. He's learning that with all the attention he gets, his best chance for success is to get easier shots, and sometimes that's not the spectacular. That's just using your footwork and getting to that little bit of open space for a nice turnaround, even mid-range shot.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say, can the Wolves use Mike Conley Jr. a little bit more? And to your point that you were just making, they need to have him on the floor so that you can take Anthony Edwards off the ball some. So now the double teams can't come as quickly. You can put him down on the baseline where he can use his big guys to set some screens for him, where he can get to that mid-range game and get some easier shots. So that's why Mike Conley Jr. could be valuable for the Wolves in a game like game number 5.
The Wemby disqualification, where he gets thrown out for a flagrant 2, I'm assuming you're watching the thing live. What were your initial thoughts as you're watching it?
The officials got it right.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, they had to throw him out of the game. I mean, that was a violent hit, and if it's, anywhere much closer to his throat, I mean, he could have done some serious damage, to Naz Reid. Luckily, that it didn't land in a bad spot, but they made the right call at that time.
Should he have received further punishment, either a suspension or at least a fine? Where are you on that?
Yeah, if he was a role player, he'd be tossed off as the rest of the series. But I'm not surprised that they didn't suspend him further. Is because he means so much to the league, and everybody wants to tune in to see him play. But they did get it right in game number 4. By tossing him out of the game. Yeah,
I don't think there's any question. I mean, it fit every bit of every definition of a flagrant 2, I think, was covered there. Do you get any sense out of a player not really known for that? It's not really been in much of his resume, even though he's not been around that long. Is that indicative of perhaps the Wolves might be getting to him mentally? Is that something that can be used again to try to get in his head, or is that oversimplifying the story?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to use every angle and every edge that you can get to see how you can get him off his game. And if being physical is one way to get him frustrated, you have to continue to play that way. And if the officials are going to allow you to use your hands and use your body a little bit more, that's what you have to do at this time of the year. Because we all know how good he is when he can get to his spots and find open space. He's deadly. And he's a guy that can do a whole lot of damage on the offensive end as well as the defensive end. But for the Wolves to have a chance to slow him down, they know they have to play a physical game against him.
De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper are both listed today. In the case of Harper, this came up today as questionable. Fox with right ankle soreness. Harper, who was excellent in Game 3, I think he scored 24, 7 for 10 from the floor, left knee soreness. If both of those guys are out, how much does that change the calculus of this game?
Oh, it's a huge change because now, the Spurs are going to have to dig deeper into their bench to see who can replace those guys. And that's a huge favor right there for the Wolves if those guys cannot play.
Let me ask you a Jaden question. I don't know if we talked about this last time we were on. He obviously had the terrific offensive game in probably the game of his life offensively in Game 6 against Denver. Do you see enough in him, in his growth offensively, that if we're looking to next year, the team next season, and if you believe in such a thing as a pecking order, that it might be time to elevate him, Jaden, to the number 2 option behind Anthony, and you drop Julius to number 3? Does that make any sense to you, or is that necessary?
It does. It makes sense, but I think if you're looking to elevate him to number 2, and I know we're in the middle of the Western Conference semifinals, and you don't want to talk about trades.
Yeah.
At this stage, but you may have to move someone to get a point guard. I think this team to really take the ultimate step, and not to say they can't get there this year, but to stay in this window for I think the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, they're going to have to get a quality point guard. And if they can get a quality point guard, that's going to allow Anthony Edwards now, to be off the ball a little bit more, where he can have more freedom and more room, where he doesn't have to face the double team every single time down to find the space that he needs on the offensive end to be more effective.
Yeah, that makes I couldn't agree more with that. You and I have talked about that before. I think he's handled it about as well as you could out of necessity at times this year. And I think they want to bring Dosunmu back, what he's ready to be. Probably in a perfect world, you still have him coming off the bench, adding to your bench. But that there's going to be a lot of interesting questions, and some of it might depend on how far they go this season. But I don't think Tim Connelly is shy about falling in love with his roster. If he thinks, all right, we've maybe gone about as far as we can with this group, I'm going to have to make a little bit of a change, because we all know, Mike Conley can't play forever. He's in a different role at this point. I think even he acknowledges that. And, there is no heir apparent really at that spot.
No, I mean, as you look at the great ones as they moved on throughout their careers, once they got past year 7, and I'm talking about Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, they were taken off the ball. They weren't asked, to beat, the triple team time and time again through an 82-game schedule, because they just couldn't do it anymore. It was too much wear and tear on their bodies once they got to the playoffs. And once you were able to move them off the ball and find that reliable ball handler, now they were able, to find more space and to be more efficient, where they still could be the best players in the game.
You're as much of a hockey guy now these days as you are a basketball guy. How disappointed were you in your Minnesota Wild club? A great opportunity to even their series at home at 2-2 and could not get it done against the very talented Colorado Avalanche. Were you disappointed?
No, you're disappointed in the loss, but they're playing against, two of the all-time great players in the history of the game, Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. And, it was a heck of a game. And all of a sudden, a turnover here or there or a good play by Colorado put them in a situation where they could take the 3-2 lead. And the Wild did everything they could when they pulled the goalie, and they had 6 on 5. But, they're playing against a very, very good team. And we all knew that it was going to be very hard to beat the Colorado Avalanche. So they still have a chance now to go back to Denver to see if they can steal Game 5 and bring Game number 6 back. But I'm not too disappointed in their efforts, because they're playing against two of the all-time greats.
There's been a lot of talk today regarding Wemby nationally of, maybe the Spurs have to consider bringing in or having or establishing one of those old-time, old-school style enforcers. Because once upon a time in your league, there were guys who that was their job. The basically is, all right, if you mess with our best player, we're going to do something about it. And hockey, of course, has been going on forever. I don't think it's as prevalent in the NBA as it once was. Does it serve a purpose? Does Wemby need an enforcer? Is there still a place for that style, or is that pretty hard the way the game is played today?
I think it's hard, based on how the game is played today, because, now that enforcer who primarily is a 4-man, now he's shooting 3-point shots. He has to be a skill guy. He just can't be a guy that's going to rough people up. I would like to see San Antonio as they move throughout his career, as we was talking about how you really relocate someone like Julius Randle, also do the same thing for Wembanyama. Mm-hmm. You put him closer to the basket, then it's 7-5.
Yep.
There's nobody can stop him. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for years was the all-time leading scorer in the history of the game with one shot. And if you put Wemby down low more times than not, he could easily average 40 points a game just because of his height and his skill and his talent. So I think as they move along, San Antonio will figure out how to use him differently, where he can be even more effective as his career goes along.
Throughout this series, when we've talked about the Spurs, I have almost every time what I say, I don't say the San Antonio Spurs, I say the San Antonio Spurs Davy. And you're the reason for that. I don't know if you know the background on this thing. In fact, I have to explain it all the time. He said, well, why do you always say San Antonio Davy? I said, well, I remember when the Spurs under Popovich had the dynasty going, and Double T would be on with Sinekin, and they'd be predicting games and series, and you get to whoever San Antonio was playing, and you would kind of take a deep breath, hesitate a bit, and say, San Antonio, Davey. And it stuck with me. So every time I can't just say the city, San Antonio. I always got to say San Antonio, Davey. Can you give us a San Antonio, Davey today?
San Antonio, Davey, and the reason why it came so natural for me because Coach Pop and I are really good friends, and I played 25 games for the San Antonio Spurs before I went to Chicago, and he and I developed a great relationship during the time that I was there. And we have always remained, good friends throughout these years. And he has been one of my all-time favorites, to be around and to have a chance to play for. So when I talk about where a lot of my thinking and knowledge comes from the game, he's a part of those 4 Hall of Fame coaches that I had a chance to play for.
God, that's remarkable, is it not? I know you consider yourself very lucky. It's not just luck, it's skill. You made your way in this league. You earned everything that you got. But to have those connections, Double T, that's got to mean everything to you.
I'm like I say, I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. I had a chance to play, for Hubie Brown. We didn't have the greatest relationship when I got there, but I had to remove my personal feelings away on how we looked at each other as people. And so that I could accept, the great teaching of basketball that he brought to the table. And I had Rick Pitino, and then, I talk about Greg Popovich, and then I get the Zen master at the end of my career to sit down and have conversations with Phil Jackson, and before that, Jim Dutcher was
that's right.
Was a wonderful coach to be around. And when you talk about hockey, I didn't know much about hockey back in the early '80s or the late '70s. And I spent a great deal of time around Herb Brooks when he was coaching the University of Minnesota. And, he and I developed a good relationship. So the philosophy of what it takes to win and get yourself prepared mentally on a daily basis, I had some very good guys to listen to. So that has kind of, shaped my way of thinking on how I see the game. And then I had the great fortune at the end of my career to play with someone like Michael Jordan. So in terms of my basketball life, I have been truly blessed, and I am very grateful for all the things that basketball has brought to me.
It's a wonderful life, Double T. That's what you're saying. That's for sure. And I didn't realize you established any kind of relationship with Herbie. I mean, so many of the people you've named, I consider such originals, right? They're all really good at what they did, but they're all different. And you talk about them. You talk about a Pop. You talk about a Phil Jackson, Herbie Brooks, etc. Ain't nobody like them.
No, I mean, the great thing about the Herb Brooks and the relationship I had with him. When I got drafted to the New York Knicks, he was coaching the New York Rangers.
Oh yeah.
So he and I, not only, we were in Minnesota together, but also we were in New York together. And, just to have a chance to sit around and talk to him, he was a guy that was in a total different sport that I knew nothing about at that stage. I knew, about the '80 Olympics team and the Miracle on Ice and all those things, and how big of a part he played in the success of those young men. But just to hear his philosophy and how he approached things and to take bits and pieces from what I could get from him and to apply it to what I was doing on the basketball court was tremendous to have, just to have those opportunities to sit down and talk to somebody like Herb Brooks.
Tremendous, yeah. Great to catch up as always, my friend. Thanks for the basketball analysis, and thank you for the history lesson, too. It's always good to get into that stuff because that stuff never gets old. Right? It never goes away.
No, it never ends. It never goes away. And thanks for having me, Dan.
100%. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Double T.
Okay, buddy.
Trent Tucker, excellent stuff from him as always. Louis, in about 1 hour, another puckhead. Trent Tucker's now a puckhead. Who knew? Well, we kind of did know, but that developed over a period of time. Louis, at 5:30, how did he process game number 4? And where do the Minnesota Wild go from here? We do have Ode to a Dead Guy to get to involving it's possible. I think it's actually probable that he may be, for one session, for one guest appearance, the greatest guest in the history of the Bumper to Bumper program. And I was reminded by a couple of alert listeners that he has indeed passed away. We'll give you details on who that is and maybe, wax a little bit nostalgic there as well when we return.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800...
It's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
Well, my mic's got to get, locked in. Do you, Guardsy, remember a longtime listener used to call in to our show, but also heavily to Common's program called Drummer Guy? Do you remember Drummer Guy, or is he before your time?
No, of course I remember Drummer.
So, Drummer Guy... And I have not heard from Drummer Guy in a long time. I hope he's well. I don't know if he still lives here or what his situation is. Common might know, actually. But Drummer Guy out of nowhere. And he was in a band, as I recall, on this occasion.
Yes.
And he says to me, hey, I think I can get Jack Douglas in studio, to come into studio to hang with you. I got him to produce my band, which might be one of the great miracles of all time in of itself. And he had to give me a little more detail on who Jack Douglas was. And very quickly it became clear that we're talking about an iconic record producer who had worked with pretty much everybody, I guess you could say, from time to time. Aerosmith, Cheap Trick, The Who, Miles Davis, the New York Dolls, Alice Cooper, the James Gang, which was Joe Walsh's band, and John Lennon. And I said, and I was skeptical. So, okay, let me know. And sure enough, it was on a Friday. He comes into studio, Drummer Guy does, with Jack Douglas. And I will tell you that for a guest we've had on only that one time, it's the only time we had him, as I recall.
We tried other times.
We did.
Yeah.
We have not had a more fulfilling hour of music conversation than on that occasion with Jack Douglas. And sadly, it's one of those we didn't save. It might be somewhere out there in the ether. Because sometimes people find stuff that I don't even know exists.
I know I have it somewhere.
Oh, you think you do?
I do have something somewhere because we played parts of it back at a different time.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's somewhere, but anyway.
Well, the story, we're bringing it up now and owing him because word has broken that he has passed away at the age of 80 years old. Family saying that he died peacefully Monday night in, I think he was still living in the greater New York area. And I got to tell you, man, the stories he told, specifically, especially, but not exclusively, about his time with John Lennon, I mean, raising my arm hairs, man. It was crazy. He was with John Lennon the night John Lennon was murdered. They were in the studio, expecting to go back to work the next morning in the studio. And had a good session. He says goodnight to John Lennon. He gets a phone call later from Jack does his wife, revealing the news that he'd been shot, that Lennon had been shot. He and his wife make it to, I want to say it was Roosevelt Hospital, to take up the vigil with Yoko. And his memory of how he got to know Lennon, how prickly he was at first, how they got to a much better place, some of the eerie nature of some of the things that he said that Lennon told him that almost seemed to feel like he had some kind of a precursor of death, premature death taking place. Absolutely stunning. Now, as Guardsy mentioned, we tried to get him for different reasons over the years, and he was very reluctant to come on. He after that initial stretch where, in fact, he did, as I recall, shortly after the murder of Lennon, he appeared on the late night show back then, the Tom Snyder Show. And that was with Yoko's consent to sort of give a sense of the Lennon, working with Lennon in the laboratory, so to speak, in the studios, etc. And it's sad. It makes me sad to think that we didn't have more time to chat with him, but I'll hold on to the hour in this very studio that he gave us, because he gave us story after story, not just about Lennon, but about Aerosmith, about his role with some musicians. I think I mentioned this not that long ago, was when they were battling substance abuse issues, he would be the guy to intervene and all but escort them to get help. And that eventually he needed the help. And that he got it. In fact, it might have been from Steven Tyler. I can't remember if it was Tyler or not, but it was a story he told about the shoe was on the other foot, and they came for me. And then he told the most amazing story of all that almost seems like it can't possibly be true. And it was about, so this goes all the way back to November 1965. He and another musician, they are obsessed with the Beatles and the Beatles sound, right? They're in the United States, they can't get enough of the sound. So they decide, we're going to go to Liverpool. We're going to take a trip. And the cheapest way, as he told us, was by steamer. And I've seen another interview he gave on this issue. People would say to me, "You're crossing the North Atlantic in late November?" And I was like, yeah, so what? I've been on the Staten Island ferry. So it makes stops in Boston, St. John's, Halifax, Iceland, Norway, Aberdeen. They keep going. He says basically that he and Mr. Leonetti, was the other musician, were the sole passengers. The rest he describes as a crew of pirates that were drunk most of the time. It was a harrowing trip. So 3 weeks later, they arrive in Liverpool. Guitars, amps, but they got no return tickets. They got no visas. They got no work permits. So they're detained on the vessel by immigration officials. I told my friend, I got you into this mess, I'll get you out of it, is the way Jack described it. I think that's been the story of my life. So he somehow sneaks off the ship in a disguise, finds a record shop, buys the Beatles' just-released Rubber Soul album. He says, I saw the Liverpool Echo, the biggest newspaper in Liverpool, and thought, these English journalists like sensational stuff. I'll tell them this story about being held captive on a ship. So he goes to the paper with this story. The editor is interested. They arrange media coverage that ultimately reached London. Embarrassed immigration officials eventually gave in. They granted them student visas, and the Echo editor put them in a band. It was going to be the continuing coverage of the Yanks in Liverpool, he said. It was amazing. We saw lots of incredible bands, bought records, and sent press back to New York. And then, without warning, the now famous Crazy Yanks, as they were called, were handcuffed, thrown into a car, onto a train, then a ship bound for the United States. But because we'd been to Liverpool and sent back all this stuff about what stars we were, we got into some really good bands. So years and years later, he's a junior engineer at the record plant, and he's talking with Lennon. They're recording. He's the producer on the Imagine album. And apparently, Lennon had wandered into that studio where Douglas was editing tapes. At this point, I guess I should say he was more of an engineer than he was a producer. So they're just striking up a conversation at this point because they don't know each other as well yet. And as an engineer at this point, he tells Lennon that he'd been to Liverpool. And Lennon's kind of, his curiosity is aroused. He says, Jack says, I was a musician. I want to know everything there was about how the music was being made. And Lennon says, well, how did that work out? And he said, well, as good and as bad. I got us deported, but good because I made a lot of noise before I did. At which point, as he told us in this studio, Lennon looks at Jack Douglas and said, you're one of the crazy Yanks? That's how they first truly bonded years after that he had made that trip over there. That was, I think, of all the stories he told, that story of how they were obsessed with the Beatles, but had no, connection. He wasn't even working in records at that point. How it comes full circle, and they end up working together. The crazy Yank who went over with nothing to get to know the Beatles sound and to be, to immerse himself in it, ends up working with a member of the Beatles too. Soon I was getting a ride home every day, talking with Len and hanging out. He asked my phone number, and he called one day and asked if I wanted to go to a party. He said, just watch my back because I'm not sure about these people. And they became, like I said, very good friends and worked together on several albums and were indeed working together the night that he passed away. So Jack Douglas, certainly for this show, gone but never forgotten. To get those kinds of yarns spun. And the beauty of it then, of course, was, what were the odds? There was no other circumstance other than the connection being drummer guy that he's going to produce this guy in our studio. And even as he did, I didn't know what he was going to tell us. I didn't know how in-depth he was going to be willing to get. I didn't know how much he was going to cooperate with us. And my recollection is we literally ran out of time because it was a Friday, and I think we took him to the end of the show. And I was tempted to just keep going and extend the program because he had more stories. He was not going to run out of stories. But the Crazy Yank story, man, I don't know how you get a better popular music story than that.
I can still hear him say it. Like when you hear Jack Douglas, I can still hear him say, you're the Crazy Yanks. Yeah, I can hear him say it however many years ago. It was the Oddfathers was the band, I believe.
You're right. That was the name of the band. You're right.
That drummer guy was part of, and he was working with the Oddfathers. That's why he came to town.
It was, I mean, I haven't had any, you want to talk about, favors done to us or to me for this show in terms of guests. It's hard to top drummer guy on that occasion. And then it did get emotional. Obviously, when he's talking about the eerie nature of knowing that he was the last guy to spend time with John Lennon. He thinks it's just another night of work. I'll see you in the morning. We'll continue on the album. And then he finds out his good friend has been shot and killed. It was a remarkable occasion for this program. And from that point forward, every time I try to reach out to him, I tried not to bug him a lot, but it was to say how grateful we were for the time he gave us and hoping to get more. But it was almost like, I don't want to keep going there. He's one of those guys who I think had just decided most of the time he wanted to be private. Other occasions he would speak up, but I think a lot of times, especially as the years went on, I don't know if he had any health issues. He decided to be a lot more private about it. But we've had some great guests over the years, man, that have opened up and cut open a vein. Nobody cut open a vein like the late, great Jack Douglas did in this very studio, and for that we will be forever appreciative. So the best to his family as well. Let's get caught up. We're a little bit behind. We'll be back in just a minute here on The Fan.
Find out who, when, and where the Vikings will play this fall when the NFL schedule is released. PA, Ben, and Pete will break it down.
Still very much in town, and he just played a show locally in his band called Sons of Gloria. Sons of Gloria. Drummer guy. And there are people asking if at some point we could try to find a bit of that interview, and maybe we can. Maybe we'll look for it and see if we could play it at some point, or at least maybe make it available via podcast. So again, for the record, Imagine on that album, Jack Douglas was the record's engineer. And then when we're talking about the big comeback album, the Double Fantasy album, I think that was in 1980. Douglas was a co-producer of that album along with Lennon and Yoko Ono. Apparently, I'm looking at one story that indicates that he and Ono later went to court over his royalties for the number one album. You know, there's sentiment and then there's business.
That's true.
You know, business it's not show friends, it's show business, as you often say.
Yeah, that's true.
And that indeed does sometimes take place. Somebody's also claiming, and I don't remember him talking about this with us, I don't even know if I knew it, that Douglas started out as a folk musician and he worked on RFK's senatorial campaign in 1964 as a songwriter, which is certainly very possible. I don't remember that we necessarily talked about that.
According to Wikipedia, that is accurate.
That is accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. We'll kind of reset the show here in a couple of these minutes as we get to the top of the hour. We do expect Luigi, usual time, to talk puck at 5:30 this evening. So if you have questions for Louie, you want to get those in early, that's okay. I don't think we have... We do know that this is an early... The beauty of tonight for the Wolves, if they really want to make a statement, the entire NBA world is going to be watching. We're the only game tonight.
And you got the Wemby backdrop.
And it's prime time.
Yep.
It's, like I said, 7 o'clock Central Time. It is a great opportunity, as daunting as the task is, for all the obvious reasons. And I don't know if we have any updated information on the two Spurs who were listed today as questionable. Two very good wing players, De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper. But that's what we're going to be continuing to watch as we get ever closer to the tip-off. Now, given it's already 5, when they call it game time decision, does that mean they don't really have to announce anything literally until game time? I don't know what the protocol is on that.
Usually,
I might text Johnny to find out.
Usually it's kind of a mix. Sometimes, because what time do they play? 7. So the coaches are about to meet the media again in the next
there might be
40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes up then. Mm-hmm. Other times it's he's out there right now. We're going to see. So it could be literally at the game. It could be in the media availability in the next hour.
Do you think it would be a little too obvious that Finchie was reacting to the Draymond Green suggestion if Ingles starts? Do you think that would be a little too obvious, or bring him in to be the enforcer, to cheap shot, get Wemby going, and if he gets thrown out of the game, Ingles is more than happy, given how little he plays, to do that for the team? That would be a little, I think it's got to be a little bit more subtle than that, doesn't it?
I agree. Also, I don't know if Ingles is I don't know if Ingles is quick enough to get there at this point.
That's a great point.
I feel like, is he going to get there
in time? So you want
to
use the kid? I don't want to traumatize the kid, though.
I know.
Our backup center.
And he's already traumatized because Joker messed with him on that jump ball.
Yes, that's true.
In the first series, where he gave him the ball at the end for the turnover, and then they had to do a jump ball. So he's already trying to figure out what city he's in. And I'm sure he looks up to Wemby. That's the thing. Rudy has molded Wemby, right?
Yes.
Berenger, I'm sure, looks up to Rudy for sure, but also Wemby, right? He's probably been reading the press clippings and following him on Instagram for the last 5 years. So I don't know if he even has it in his heart to do that.
Yeah, you might be right. Well, I in all seriousness, I think, and you heard, if you're listening, Double T agrees, you can't go the day-to-day route, I should say. You got to be more subtle than that. And the war is the game. The war is winning the game to give yourself the best chance to win this series. And so you can worry later about the alleged pride issues that somebody's got to fire back at him. Here's I think part of the problem in 2026. Players are not accustomed to that style of play. I don't know if it's in their DNA to do effectively what a couple generations ago players did do. In fact, because I think they knew how to do it with a little art attached to it, right? Where it wasn't so obvious, but that was intentional. That's a message that we're sending to you. I don't think the protocol has changed so much. I think it's more likely to be awkward and off-putting if it involves players who really don't know how to do that. Well, how do I subtly send them the kind of message that Day-Day is talking about?
Right.
I don't know if that's even possible anymore, but you can't lose the thread. And the thread is trying to actually upset what everybody in the league expects and wants. No, this is the future. This is the guy. They have to advance. Nobody has a chance to beat Oklahoma City. But if anybody does a San Antonio Davy, to me, that's the war you want to win. Okay, we don't care what the Spurs are supposed to do, what we're supposed to do at this point. We'll worry about the intramural nonsense later. Let's exact our form of revenge for that cheap shot by a gifted young player. Let's beat him. Against all odds, let's beat him.
10.5-point underdogs tonight. Mike Conley talked yesterday, I think, about how he's been proud of Naz and Jaden and other guys because they haven't gotten caught up in the game-to-game stuff that happens and they've just moved on and not been in their heads as much. That's a sign of maturity.
It is.
It's a sign of maturity. This is, to me, the sign of maturity to say, sure, we could go clock Wemby and we could even the score, or we could just go win pivotal Game 5 and come back and send them home Friday night at Target Center, whereas Anthony Edwards says people will be stumbling all over themselves ready to go.
Is it possible that Randall should be the player and the Wolves' chances, even if he gets thrown out, might actually be enhanced if he's not available tonight? Well, I mean, you did it earlier.
I know, you're right. Yeah. You're following my lead there. Yeah. Well, and Randall was the one that was going for Jokic big time.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
In my opinion, I still think Jokic wanted the reaction he got to try to get a couple of guys tossed.
No question.
Like, I still think he was playing chess with that whole thing. And I thought Jaden did a good job when Naz got elbowed of just holding Wemby up. Old Jaden, I think, would have thrown him into Charlie Swanson, Lexus of Wyzetta seats.
Or hit the stanchion.
Yeah.
With his fist.
I feel like he would have done something much more than just kind of hold him like he did. So, yeah, we'll see. But Randall was coming hot at Jokic when that whole thing went down.
It's undeniable.
So
we'll see how it goes. All right, top 5.
We'll give you the latest that we know about the San Antonio Spurs Davy injury report, and the Wild backs are officially against the wall.
You're listening to Barrero.